All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only. It should be used at the listener's discretion. Yeah, my wife took the kids to the park, so we're on.
Oh,
I
perfect.
wouldn't say a ticking time bomb till they come home, but you'll know if they come home. It'll sound like the SWAT team's at my door up here in the office. So,
Well,
um,
James, we got about 11 seconds. So
that's
anything else?
about yeah. I have like to track my iPhone up on my wife right now to see when they leave the park, so we know
Nice.
when the chaos is going to resume. But all right, dude. Well, welcome. Let's just kick it off then. We'll just jump right
Sounds
into
great.
it. Welcome. Thanks for making time. And I'm going to let you just go at it, man. Why don't you just introduce yourself? We'll kick it off because we got at least 3 topics to talk about today. So we'll dig in right away and get going. So kick it off, man. Give me your intro and what you're here for.
Sounds great, Chris. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we were able to coordinate this and make it work. My name is James Boomhower. I am a 20-year paramedic that is now in the flight and critical care space for the last 10. I am a graduate clinical intern in the field of clinical psychology, just a handful of weeks away from graduating, and I run a mental health, suicide awareness, and peer support platform called Stay Fit for Duty.
That's about as succinct as it gets, man. You got that elevator pitch down. I really appreciate that because that can really spur off into some details. I actually worked for a critical care company before I was in medic school out here in Illinois as a ground transport driver. And one of the other cool things I got to do was, as the least skilled person there, because it ran a driver who could be EMTB, and then critical care medic and a nurse is how they ran here. So I was like the donkey of the crew, and so my job as the donkey was to, when the flight team got a call, I had to go launch the helicopter, which was like take the pallet jack, hook it up to the front, plug it into the little trap door, and then that gives you power. So you tow the helicopter out of the hangar, and then I was like, well, now what do I do? And they're like, well, you leave the pallet jack thing hooked up to it, and they're going to start the engines. And there was 2 engines on the top of the helicopter. I don't know the model of it, but and they said, okay, so you say number 1, and then they shoot off number 1 engine. And I say, what am I looking for? They're like, if it explodes, they'll know, and so will you. But that's pretty much it. I was like, well, then what purpose do I have here? Like, and they're like, okay, do number 2, and they do number 2. I said, now what? And they say, now you crawl underneath it and unplug it, and then screw the little trap door shut. But you better make sure that trap door is shut because they're going to start taking off, and that thing won't. If it's not shut completely, it'll be about 50 feet in the air, and then it'll pop open, and then they have to come back down here, and you get yelled at, and then you shut it, and then they take off again. I was like, oh man, I don't feel like I'm even good enough for this job. I'm like, this is even too much stress for little dumb me. So, but it looked cool, and you got to say you towed helicopters around and were a part of something. So it was pretty awesome. But I never got to fly. I went to medic. That was a short-lived job. I went to medic school shortly after that, and then my fire department career kind of took off after that. So, but seeing what you guys did, man, and the aggressiveness in those crews and the invasiveness of your willingness to intervene with people, I was like, oh my God. So definitely a tip of the cap. It's something I never had that much interest in, or probably the aptitude to pull off. But that gives you a pretty extreme example and insight into the world of grief and psychology, because the duration of your guys' calls is just ridiculous. And then the duration of charting for your calls is also just absurd. So to spend that much time, like, it's tough to go to on a call and anything traumatic for us. But realistically, you can say, no matter how bad this call is, in like an hour and a half, we'll be all done with it. Like, longest term scenario, 2 hours long, and we'll be back at the station. For a critical care team, it's like, well, the helicopter's leaving, see in 6 hours when you're almost done with your charting. And it was just like, holy cow, what a massive exposure to possibly traumatic stuff. But now with your platform, you're presenting it in a really, really approachable and usable way. And so that's why I want to have you on, because I think there's a lot of junk out there and a lot of idealistic stuff out there. But I really liked your approach on social media of how you're presenting it. So I think this is going to be a pretty awesome talk, man. So I gave you a couple topics right off the bat, and one of the ones you kind of keyed in on was EMDR, which I'm not super familiar with. My brother's a practitioner of it. Don't let that change your opinion of it. Um, you won't offend me, but let's just jump into that. So give me your thoughts on where you want to go with that one so we can keep this thing moving.
Totally. So to start, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The idea behind EMDR, no eye pun intended, is we're helping traumatic memories get stored in a better place. And I don't want to A, oversell myself, and B, poorly explain the procedure, but the thought process is by encouraging reprocessing of a traumatic event, which doesn't mean reliving, re experiencing, just reprocessing. We can improve the level of distress that someone is feeling in real time.
Hmm.
So we find individuals that are suffering pretty profoundly from some rather overt PTSD symptomology, or they've had an incident that is really high on the kind of acute or critical stress phase. Can we utilize EMDR as a tool to help ensure that that traumatic memory goes to a place in our brain that is designed to process these memories and make them more of a memory than a nightmare? To use kind of a turn of phrase there, right? The idea of you can be like, oh, yeah, that call was terrible and it's sad and I don't like it, but it's not, oh my God, I still smell the smoke. Oh my God, I can still hear the screams, and really disruptive. I think one of the challenges of EMDR most recently, and this is coming as someone who is in the very infancy of obtaining his certification to practice as an EMDR clinician, most places encourage you to become a counselor or a therapist first. And then you go through your EMDR credentialing from there. So as I'm just starting to dip my toe in the provider side of the coin, I worry that in the marketing of EMDR, we sell it as the one fix. Just
Hmm.
find a person who does this thing, you'll see them 2-3 times, and you'll be all better. My worry with that is unrealistic expectations of the procedure, right? The third time you need to come in, now you think that you're too broken or there's some big moral failing that
Sure.
even EMDR can't fix. And well, I'm very cognizant to not align myself with these clinicians, and I'm very sure your brother falls into this category as well. The idea that the therapist or counselor is just selling the intervention. I'm not your counselor. I'm not your therapist. I'm just doing EMDR, and then off
Yeah.
you go. The good ones, quote unquote, bear with me here, either align with your mental health provider to be adjunctive care, right? You see James as a counselor. James doesn't have his EMDR credentials yet. So you're going to go see Bob. And Bob is going to do the EMDR, but it's very collaborative. It's no different than seeing a psychiatrist for your medications and seeing a counselor for the more traditional kind of talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, what have you.
Okay.
I think there's really interesting space for EMDR in the critical incident space. We're seeing both critical incident stress models and models more focused on psychologic first aid use it as a emergency device, mental health tourniquet, if you will, right?
Hmm.
Can we stop the bleed? But then again, to use this metaphor on the medical side of the coin, if you and I roll up to somebody who's bleeding so bad they need a tourniquet, we don't send them home. We send them to someone else, right?
Right.
Like we stop the bleed. However, now we need to encourage that you have this multidisciplinary care to follow that through.
Hmm.
So there's no shade on EMDR as a technique. There's no shade on a vast majority of EMDR providers. My kind of pulpit here as I talk about this is remembering that this is one intervention, no different than cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, you name it. I worry that we are unintentionally selling it as the magic elixir and not as a tool that works really, really well, but works in concert with a number of different tools and as part of a professional's acumen.
I, that fits so well into frankly, so many things in the fire service that I can think of. I think we had the same hurdle with peer support early on too,
Mm-hmm.
where peer support was this astounding thing that was going to come out, and some people were like, yeah, it's a great gateway into getting people help after an incident. And other departments took it on as like, that's all we need is just talk to each other. Like, perfect. We'll send you to the weekend seminar, come back, and we're all good, man.
Yeah.
And then we saw this huge shift. And Wendy Lund was a major proponent of this, of like explaining it, of like, no, this is not the fix. This is you're talking to someone who can open the door to where you're supposed to go. Because she started examining like, well, what happens down the line to these peer support members? Like now they're just getting dumped on. And if you don't give them a road to process that, or the ability to get that off their plate to where it's supposed to go, you're just leaving them with everybody's problems. And they're not trained to that level. They're just somebody who wants to help. There's someone who
Right.
wants to um, get that end result of like helping their community or helping their fire service. But you're basically considering them to be the end road. Like that's it. You go talk to him and it's all good. Well, what happens to him? And so I think there's been a major shift in the past 2 or 3 years of recognizing that. And, that happens with other concepts in the fire service too. The Quint concept, transitional attack. These are all things that were considered like they were taken out of what they were made to do. And then places like, this is the answer. So just do that. And they were kind of hijacked by people and turned into like a product then to sell. And then the actual purposeful use of it is somewhere back there in history, but we don't need that because what we're doing with it works anyways, so it's all good. So I think
Right.
that's really relatable to a lot of people, and I appreciate your take on that. um, you said too though there's a massive surge of people looking for that, which I think differs from my area, where I think the perception of EMDR is like, great, that incident happened, I had to write a report about it. I had to talk to two cops about it. I had to talk to my peer support people about it. I tried to avoid talking to my wife about it. Now I got to go talk to this person and talk about it in detail while they watch me. Like, I don't want to do that again. Like, that's not what I'm looking for. So I think it's relatively underutilized in my area. But you were saying by you, it's like a hot thing. People are looking for it and they can't find it.
Yeah, it's we're trying to figure out if it's the hot new thing or if it's just being promoted well and people are coming towards it. There is a ton of peer-reviewed data that says that it can be very helpful. And I
Yeah,
think what you're looking at is you're looking at people that say, "Hey, look, here's a great tool," or to your point, "Hey, buy my product because this one peer-reviewed article said it might be 1% better than that other stuff."
sure.
Right? So please use this one because it's better. I think it's important to remember your individual EMDR experience will vary, and I don't want to steal the explanation that your EMDR counselor or clinician who provides you EMDR will give you, but there isn't a guarantee that you have to relive the experience in the way you think you need to. And as I mentioned
Sure.
earlier on, it's reprocess, not re-experience. It can be very helpful to remember that because it seems like when we talk about it, they're like, oh man, this person's going to hold two pens in front of me or two flashy lights or two clickies or whichever somatic tool you use, and they're going to go like this. And I'm going to have to explain the whole thing in detail. And again, I want to allow those individual clinicians to describe their process the best way possible. But I would bring that up to your EMDR clinician rather than avoid them entirely because of this fear. I would say, this is what I'm really worried about, and this is what I don't want to do. How can we still make this happen without me having to do that? Which, to circle all the way back, Chris, harkens to my point of why you need to go to a counselor, a mental health professional that you trust that does EMDR, not just the first EMDR human who says, oh, yeah, I have the clicky wands in my back pocket. Come on over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. I think that speaks to maybe our second point here too. I recognized a major cultural shift in the fire service, and with it has brought great things. The emergence of your company and your voice. One of the things that I'm really worried about, though, is that um, I'm sure you can relate to this. When my wife and I were dating, people were like, "Oh, just wait till you get married." And then we were trying to have kids, like, "Wait till you have your first kid." And then it was like, "Wait till you have your second kid," and "Wait till you're this," and everything's like another doom and gloom coming around the corner, right?
Mhm.
And it was just a common thing. I feel like we're entering a point in the fire service where it's like, um, oh, wait till you get hired. Wait till you have your first traumatic call. Wait till you're screwed up like me. Wait till we put these things around the corner.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a prerequisite that you got to get screwed up now to be a part of the fire service. Instead of saying, like, let's be honest, there's a good chance that a majority of us will go through our careers without having the worst case scenario call happen, or without having the most traumatic thing you can think of that probably won't happen. But we put it in the light now of like, everybody absolutely needs to go to counseling because you're screwed up, and everybody absolutely needs to be aware of this because you're going to get screwed up and you're going to suffer and you're going to, it's all bad. And for some people that's true, but for a lot of people, it's like, can I just have a decent career and maybe that stuff happens? Just give me the tools to take care of it. Do I have to be reminded every day that I might get screwed up? So I think we're at that end right now because we have a lot of solutions, but we're looking for problems to apply those to. So we're forcing them into maybe people that aren't ready for that or don't need it or just inappropriate situations. But I'd like to hear your take on that because that's just my ground level view of receiving stuff. I'd like to hear what you're kind of seeing as you're finishing up your schooling and where these trends are going. Because I don't want it to go back to all the way to the other side of the pendulum swing where it's just a wasteland. But where's the middle ground in that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I think there are two really important points. I think the first important point is to recognize that we often reflect trauma the same way you did. The big bad call, the worst call, the this, the that, the other thing. Remembering that there's a pretty solid spectrum of what makes a call traumatic,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly variable. A solid example that I use when I talk about this is when I was a 911 field trainer at one of my 911 agencies in New England. I really had to provide a ton of support and care to an individual who was really traumatized by what you and I would assume would be a really vanilla MVC. It was one person not dead. They did what we all tell people not to do, and they were in the passenger seat with their little piggies hanging out the window. And when they hit, they broke their tibia and fibula in such a way that their leg was literally backwards. So at the kneecap, it just twisted like
Yeah.
a broken Barbie doll, right, or something. And everyone kind of went, ooh, right, and like did the thing, and off to the hospital you go. And on the surface, that is a human with an injured long extremity,
Right.
all in a day, right?
Right.
And this relatively new EMS colleague of mine was very, very disturbed by it. And the response they got was like, if you think that's bad, right? And just completely invalidating, breaking down. When we zoom out and we recognize that when we talk to the American Psychiatric Association, the American Association of Counselors, the American Academy of Fire Science Psychologists, right, all of these individuals that specialize in this space, we all recognize that calls that are traumatic are ones in which you feel helpless, hopeless, had a real or perceived threat to life, was overwhelming, or profoundly sad. And if you look at your call volume in that net, you've just caught a million more calls.
Yeah.
And
Right.
if we say, listen, there's a lot of stuff in this world that you can see that can be traumatic. We want you to know where your resources are. And we want to give you tools before you need them to not only build your psychological resistance, your ability to not be affected, but bolster your psychological resilience, your ability to pick yourself back up again when you are affected. If we say, now go do the thing, right?
Right.
Work out, hydrate, eat well, live a life outside the fire service. And if you need us, we'll be there. You're golden. But you're absolutely right. If we push too far and mandate everyone sees a therapist every week and mandate that every single call has this really elaborate CASD after it, I do think we're missing the mark.
Yeah.
My agency in particular has a list of really traumatic calls that we will automatically activate the question of, do you need the peer support team?
Sure.
Yes, right now. Yes, on my ride home, or no. And I will wholeheartedly admit that in our first iteration of that, we forgot the no, right? We didn't see the forest through the trees. We said, well, of course you're going to be traumatized either right now or later. And that says, hey, listen, every human is different. Every human is going through things in a different space, has different lived experiences. Chris is totally fine. He hit this anonymous paging button and he said, no, I'm fine. I don't need anything. Boomer said, God, I'm in school and I'm really stressed and my sleep is junk. And that patient had the same name as my ex-girlfriend. And I don't know, it just hit me funny. Can I talk to somebody on the way home? So the shortest answer, I gave you a really good elevator pitch in the beginning and now I'm getting long-winded. The shortest answer is your teams need to know that it is part of being in the fire service or civil service and first response as a whole, how to prepare for it and what to do if they need the support. I think if you catch those three, you've met all the marks. Because you're absolutely right. 20 years ago, where somebody takes a big long drag off their cigar, says there's no crying in baseball, and then just walks away, that's
Yeah.
wrong. Telling every human that they need to see a therapist because a child died, also wrong. We have to understand that the lived experience of individuals can't be caught in some beautiful protocolized thing.
I think that's perfect. And that's actually one of the things that I know my brother struggled with, because he more or less got the peer support team going in our department, did a really good job with it, got everybody to a really good level of education, and went to outside courses beyond just the peer support stuff. So they're all just kind of informed to different ways of coaching and different ways to communicate and approaching problems, all with the goal of so they could better get people off their plate, right?
Love
Not
that.
so they could harbor them and treat them, but so they were better at their job of channeling people. But then you had this team of 6 guys who was like, almost like, all right, when's the next bad thing going to happen so I can use my skills? And everybody
Yeah.
saw that. So we're like trying to be like, oh, you know what? He had a bad call. Maybe you should go talk to that guy. And then my brother was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not approaching people and telling them that they need our services. Like, that's not what we're doing. And we're
Yeah.
not going to be the, the death parade when everything, something bad happens. You're not going to see 6 of us walking in the door and be like, all right, who needs help? Like,
Yep.
that's not how this is going. So that I certainly understand that, because we all want to help. And then if we have a chance to help each other, we're even more apt to do that. So you have this team of people, and you're like, I just want them to be able to help us. So I'm going to try to get them in the game as much as possible. But that can end up being more harm than good, because now when you walk in and I think I'm fine, and you walk in and be like, yeah, you went through that call, you need some help, right? I'll be like, I don't, do I? I don't think so. Should I? And then that
Yeah.
doubt that you talked about before starts to creep in of like, maybe I am screwed up. Like maybe I should be feeling bad right now. Now I feel bad for not feeling bad, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's a major player and a major struggle I see with a lot of departments is they have the good tool, they want to use the tool, but man, the correct application of that tool is tough. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm thankful for guys like you to point us in the right direction and kind of temper that and give us the ability to be patient and the ability to let people come to us. And it's a lot of the same approach I've talked about in here before with the fitness stuff that me and Kurt do. We got from my department is we basically just let everybody know we're around. And if we work with you, we're not going to make you run stairs and do jumping jacks. But if you want to do that, you can come to us and we'll run stairs with you and do jumping jacks. But having that looming over your head of like, crap, I got to work with Chris and Kurt. They're going to make me work out for 6 hours a day. That's not
Right.
going to help anybody, right? Um, have you been able to successfully go in and kind of present these topics and say these things and then see change happen? Like when do you get to see the fruits of that? And or is it more of just a thing where you go in, you see like, hey, you guys are putting on a little strong, here's some misconceptions, let me give it to you, and then you just got to trust that it works? I imagine you as just a normal human would love to hear that, like, hey, we didn't bug this person, but that's a really tough feedback to give you, right? So how have you seen the success of some of the stuff that you're putting out there to agencies?
I'm really fortunate that my full time squad is full of incredibly intelligent, very strong minded people.
Hmm.
And we live in a department that says if it's wrong, fix it. And if there's a problem, tell someone. And I am not necessarily talking about my leadership or like the administrative structure, but like the line staff. If there's a problem, you'll know about it.
Hmm.
I think that we were a early acceptor and a little bit slower adopter. I think as a whole, our team said, okay, sure, there's going to be this peer support thing. Yeah, Boomer's been drawn about that for a long time. Like, I'm glad it's finally off the ground, but I'm never going to use it.
Sure.
And then over time, as I mentioned before, we recognized, oh, shoot, we were unintentionally forcing ourselves on you because we forgot this option to say no, right? We said yes now or yes later. And the empathy of my team to allow it to evolve and to call out when things are going well and call out when things are going poorly. I think you hit the nail on the head. I like your idea of, when my team needs to work out, they know the people they can come to. I know I can come to you and say, Chris, I'm struggling to do a pull up. What can I do? And you not be like, well, first we're going to throw this vest on and run 4 miles.
Right.
I think there's a good surrogate to that in my team where all the members of the peer support team find themselves a bit unofficially utilized. Like maybe
Mm.
they didn't answer that page, or maybe there's this absence of a big formal request. But hey, can you walk me to my car? I've been having nightmares about that call. And like, boom, right there you go. And you're doing the thing with this understanding that we can give you more help if you want it. We can normalize what you're experiencing. if it is something that can be normalized, right? And if there is a rare instance of something that is really amiss and really need of really intensive kind of psychoactive work, we have players in play who have that ability and can provide that. So I hope this is my watermark. If anyone on my team is listening to this and I'm wrong, now's the time to like send me an email or shoot me a phone call. But I think our team is understanding of the goal of the platform, has found its utilization a net positive, and knows that they can utilize it in ways outside of the ways that we've designed it, right? The
Sure.
number of people that answer the page that say I need help, very low. The number of people that call me and say, can we talk for 10 minutes? Really high, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I consider a win. On the outside departments that I work with, speak for, consult for, I hear a tremendous amount of positivity. I unfortunately not being embedded in many of those departments. Some were, my former departments that I work very closely with, that I have a much more kind of in tune sense to the day to day. Those I can get a bit more reliable feedback. Primarily, what I hear and what I'm going for is I've never heard someone explain it that way, and that's
Mm.
really my goal, right? Of great, this guy does the job, he's done the thing, he's tagged hydrants, he's worked in the helicopter, right? He's done a fair bit of all the things paramedics do in the modern 911 landscape. I believe him. I heard it well, and I know I have a resource if I need it. And that is really, I think, all we can ask for.
I really subscribe to that one. I this is the problem with talking on these weekly. I can't remember if I told the story on here or to Kurt or someone else, but a couple of the presentations I did a few years ago, I stopped trying to teach people new stuff. And I told them that right off the bat, because if I'm going to a department and they want fitness stuff, I'll say, you might learn some stuff. Like I might correct your squat form or whatever we're doing for the topic. If I'm going to a conference full of practitioners, I start off with like, the chances of you learning something new today are pretty slim. You're going to, if you just write down what I say and look at it later, there's not going to be very many new facts on there. You might get one or two, but that's not the goal. I said, my goal is I'm going to tell you 2 to 3 stories in each category, and maybe one of those stories helps you talk to someone else about this better. Maybe I explain it in a way that you never really thought of before, and now you're like, oh, you know what? I bet so and so would understand that. And one of the things that we did was like the firefighter wellness ladder of, instead of just saying like get good sleep and eat good food and exercise and that, we started to envision that of like, what if we put this into a firefighter thing? So the bottom rung is sleep, and the second rung is nutrition, and the left beam is fitness, and the right beam is mental health. And the rule in the fire service is try to maintain 3 points of contact, or else you're not moving or you're falling off. So how can we format these things to give you a better look at it, a different look, so then you can go back and communicate that better to your people? And so seeing your stuff on social media, it feels like a lot of the same way of like, there's only so many nuts and bolts you can
Mhm.
reteach on, right? But
Yeah,
how can we communicate these things better so more people can understand them and get them out there? So with that, and this isn't on the topic list necessarily, can you think of one thing or a couple things that you commonly see that you're like, man, I've seen this thing explained so many times the same way, and I just wish they would try this approach at it? Or I got this thing that I developed that's a much better way to communicate this issue or this thing to the people I talk to, and I wish this was more. I wish they communicated like this more often, because I think it would hit home a lot better.
that's a great question. As you were asking it, I have ADHD. So I'll own that as you were asking it, I was coming up with different answers, and that's not a good way to reflectively listen. So I apologize.
It's all good.
I think the truest answer I can give you that right now is my frustration with resilience education.
Okay.
I tell everyone, and there are lots of good resilience educators. This is not like me selling the illness and the cure at the same time. If someone comes to you and says, I give a bang up talk on resilience, I'm going to teach your team how to become resilient, show
Mm.
them the door. If you look at modern first responders and modern healthcare providers, which is a vast majority of my network, military, first response, healthcare providers, that's my umbrella, that's my group, already resilient. It would be the same thing as someone coming to you and say, can you teach me how to grow a bicep? And you're like, no, man, you got one. It's right there. It might not be
Ab.
as strong as you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
I will help you strengthen it. I will show you tips and tricks to make it stronger. But the inference that you don't have it, and again, I think some of that on behalf of some of the other people in the sphere is unintentional. But
Yeah.
what you're telling people is sit down because you don't have this,
Mm,
instead of I've done your job in my own facet, right? I haven't worked at your department, right? I can't share the lived experience of everything, but I too have walked people down 4 flights of stairs at 3 in the morning. I too have carried people down 3 flights of stairs at
right.
2 o'clock in the morning, and I've done CPR on a backboard down 3 flights of stairs at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I understand that telling you to sleep for 8 hours is a joke. Is that the goal? Yes. How can we still get there when your current set of circumstances doesn't allow it? I'm a full time grad student, a full time counseling intern, and a full time critical care transport provider that runs his own company. If I looked you dead in the face and said, I sleep for 8 hours every night, they'd be like, then you need some more beauty cream because look at you. Like, that does not look like 8 hours of
Right.
sleep. And I know it's not true. So my two biggest pulpits there are stop teaching people how to become resilient because we
Mm,
already are, and allow yourself to live in the gray. We specialize as a profession in improvising, adapting, and overcome. And if I can get you to get 5.5 hours of sleep a night instead of 3, that
mm,
is a cataclysmic win. If I say it doesn't count unless it was 7.5 or 8, you're
right.
never going to do it. Just like you're not going to tell somebody to run for 2 miles with the weight of vest on or they haven't worked out. Absolutely not. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
So if we meet people in that moderation space, we'll get more buy-in overall and will ensure more consistent results overall.
That's a really cool way to look at it, especially with the, and it's more than a semantics argument because I think that's what you see is it's an all or nothing mentality, and you'll get people coming in as if you're right, as if it didn't exist. And my own ADHD was firing off when you're explaining that, and I think abs is the perfect relation to that because everybody wants abs. Well, you already got abs. Like it's a musculoskeletal structure of your body. They're there. Like they exist.
Right.
If you took away all the stuff on top of them, they're sitting there.
Yeah.
But we people want to grow abs. It's like, well, you got to get. That's not the goal. The goal is to get rid of the stuff on top so you can see them better, which takes these other measures. But fantastic way of describing that. Um, and I've never really, to your credit, I've never really looked at that verbiage before, but I'm certainly going to start because I think that's indicative of someone who, if they have that difference in terminology in it, that's probably an indicator that they've really put a lot of work into the product they're putting out. Instead of saying, well, this is a talk on resiliency, I guess I'll just name it giving your guys resiliency. Like it's more indicative that's it's a good organic product in total, right?
Yeah, I
Really good one,
completely
man.
agree.
Uh, I we've been on for about 30 minutes. I feel like we've covered an hour and a half of stuff in 30 minutes for some reason. So we're at that dangerous breaking point right now where we either get to the last point, the thing you want to talk about, or we start making up stuff and it turns into a 2 hour show. So I have no problem keeping it brief because I think we packed so much into it. And I'm very confident that you'll be back on in the future and
Love
with
that.
an array of topics. But you had a little bit of a personal thing you wanted to run through real quick because of a recent happening near you. So I want to give you the floor and let's get into that topic a little bit and then we'll kind of round this thing out.
Absolutely. In the same light of resilience, I will share a practice that I used to do that has proved no benefit. So I don't do it anymore. Every bone in my body wants to give you a trigger warning because we're going to talk about suicide. Well, acknowledging that trigger warnings do nothing but ramp up people's anxiety. It doesn't actually
Right.
help people. It just makes them more scared.
I'm about to punch you in the face. Yeah, here it
Yeah,
comes.
that's it. That's it. Yeah, right. You're all spooled up. You're all ready for something.
Yeah.
I, I live in a crisis space, right? I am a very infrequent, admittedly, volunteer with the crisis text line. I'm part of a state CISM team. I run our agency's peer support team. I'm part of a critical care focused CISM team. I'm in a lot of crisis psychology and peer support. I can set my watch to the fact that a provider will die by suicide every 4 days in America. That has very recently hit some very good friends of mine close to where I grew up. And it feels very disingenuous to talk about this because everyone listening can be like, well, yeah, this happened to me so soon. I don't even ask anymore. I used to ask in my conferences and in my lectures, who here has been touched by suicide? And every hand goes up. So, especially today, I don't want to ruin Chris's set, but we're recording on Memorial Day, which is an exceptionally challenging day for our men and women in the armed forces.
Mm-hmm.
And by proxy, our first responders, because there's such a meshing of those Venn diagrams here. I cannot overemphasize the fact that it is okay to need support and help. And it is imperative to remember that suicide is a very, very permanent solution to a temporary problem. I'm not saying it doesn't suck. I'm not saying it's not awful. I'm not saying that it won't hurt. But we can get you to a place where you no longer want to die by suicide. And my ask is you allow yourself to try to get to that space and remind everyone listening to your podcast that asking someone if they're thinking about harming or killing themselves will never increase someone's risk of dying by suicide. So, when in doubt, do it. It may make the conversation uncomfortable, it may piss some people off, but it will also keep people alive. So, if something in your gut says, man, I don't know, I don't like it, oh God, I don't want to, it's such an uncomfortable question, I don't want to ask.
It's extremely uncomfortable. It's extremely counterintuitive also, right? I think we need to acknowledge that of there's a very real gravitational pull towards that word, and you're afraid that if you mention it, that's going to be the thing that sets it off or condemns someone to do it. And with that knowledge, though, that you said, which is absolutely true, that it does not increase the chances of it, is such a difficult thing to understand because you almost feel like you're going to, with such a grave term, you're going to call them out or shame them or, like I said, condemn them to it. But I also think that lesson that you just said is under delivered as well. I think a lot of people
Absolutely.
are afraid to have those conversations because they don't want to be stuck without anywhere to go, which comes back on our training and our ability to say, like, if you start the conversation, I don't want to start the conversation because I don't want to give this person nothing if they
Right.
say the wrong thing to me, which is actually the right thing to you.
Absolutely. And
Um,
it is so painful to hear that. And I, in no way, shape, or form, want this to be misconstrued as me shaming what we call a suicide survivor, the people that are affected by the suicide of an individual. Sometimes we do everything right, and individuals still die by suicide. A vast majority of the time, when we intervene, we can prevent suicide. You mentioned improvising and overcoming. I'll give you the two biggest tools you need. When someone says yes, you either stay with them or get to them, as long as there's not anything that's an imminent threat to your own well being involved. And you call a professional. 911, 988. Most peer support teams would say hopscotch right over the peer support team, right?
mm,
You don't need
yeah.
three peers. You need trained mental health professionals to be in that mix. And in some instances, that's 911. And I know the fear that comes with me telling 911 professionals that maybe 911, but I will also remind you that many, many places throughout the country have an incredibly sophisticated and very private mechanism for behavioral health crises of their own people. Massachusetts
Mm,
is one of them, where there are a handful of hospitals that have a very unique backdoor. John Doe is your name now. You're in room 37 with the curtain closed. Like, it's not like, oh, Chris, hey, when you drop that drunk off in room 4, can you see how Bob's doing? No,
yeah.
it's like Bob's not at the hospital right now, right? He's tucked away, secure. So
Wow.
you hit the nail on the head. But that's, we talk about improvising, adapting, and overcoming. If someone says yes, you get to them if it is safe for you to do so, and you call for more help. If you can't get to them or get a hold of someone that can, you call for more help. And it obviously gets much more sophisticated the more advanced your training is. But for the boots on the ground, that's what you need to remember.
Yeah. Thanks for digging me out of that hole too. I certainly didn't mean to inadvertently shame anybody who's been through that as a suicide survivor, but um, yeah, man, it's incredible. And thank you for all that. Another thought, my ADHD brain was moving. Another thought popped in my head, and then I started listening again, and then it went away. So maybe I know you don't consider that rude because it's happened to both of us about 50 times in this conversation. So,
Absolutely.
all right, man, I appreciate it. See, look, just like that, we're at 45 minutes, just like that. It zooms up to right where we're supposed to be. What do you want to leave people with? I mean, you left them with so much already. If you just want to do your sign off and give your contact, that's cool. If you got anything else rattling around your brain, let's get it out and we'll wrap this thing up.
So what I'd like to wrap up on is a tired phrase that many of you have heard before with hopefully a little spin on it. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to remember that not being okay can mean I need a mental health counselor, a peer supporter, a critical incident stress team, or a sandwich or a water. I need 20 minutes to rest, right? Not being okay is a very variable term, and it's okay to be okay. None of this may resonate with you. And like we said in the very beginning, we just want you to know what resources you have if you need them. Remember that evolves and you'll be good to go. You're not guaranteed to not be okay. You're not guaranteed to fly through your entire career without a single event. You give yourself permission and space to be whatever you are in real time, and you'll be golden. As far as my formal sign off is concerned, my primary social media is Instagram, where you can find me at stay_fit4duty. And I'll be sure that Chris and I put some stuff in there so you can see it. My website is stayfitforduty.org. Email address, contact info, all of that is there. Only caveat is none of that contact info is a surrogate for a crisis line. Please don't call that office number. Please don't email me saying that you're in crisis, because it's not monitored 24/7, and I want to make sure that you have the right crisis tools available to you. Chris, thanks so much. I appreciate this.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Great sweatshirts also. I forgot to say I got a
appreciate it, man. So. Thank you very much. Yeah, please check out the website.
I like the hat, the dark on dark hat. I dig that. So
that's it.
Website's good for all, man. Go to the website, go to his Instagram, check him out. We'll definitely put his contact in the show notes. And then I'll probably list off a couple of crisis lines just for the fun of it too, right? Might as well give people everything we got. So thanks, Boomhower. Appreciate it, man. This was awesome. We're definitely going to talk again, and go enjoy your Memorial Day.
I look forward to it, man. Thanks so much.
All right, buddy.